I just wanted to start with a little introduction into adaptation and resilience and what they are, and then I'll hand over to Deb in a moment. So, what is adaptation and resilience? So, I don't know if you've heard of climate mitigation, but these are all the actions that you can take to reduce your emissions. So obviously climate action planning, decarbonisation, that is about climate mitigation. And this is just a general slide. This is not specific to schools, but the types of activities that we want to think about are sustainable transport or minimising the amount of transport that's happening. We want to use clean energy. We want to have energy efficiency measures. But adaptation is slightly different in that it looks beyond climate change, as in, let's accept that climate change is happening. How can we adapt to cope with the consequences and the risks of climate change? So things that fall under adaptation are disaster management. Now, obviously, as a council, we think about disaster management on an extreme scale, but we do have to think, how will schools face, back in 2022, we had those heat waves, and when I was working in a school, we did actually shut. We had to. Our buildings could not cope with the heat. So I think there was at least 4 lost days then that we had to move up to online learning, and that could, or probably will, happen more often. Maybe it won't be heat waves, maybe it will be flood risk, but the point is our weather is changing. We are going to be facing more extreme weather. So how are we going to make sure we're planning for more days where we maybe can't come into school? How can we keep our schools running? And then, looking at flood risk, is there any way to adapt to flood risk? Can we move students? Can we alter our site to make sure that, short bursts of rainfall don't lead to problems within our grounds? And then we want to think about infrastructure upgrades. And then kind of in the middle here, there's also activities that we can think about which do both. So saving water, obviously that can save you money as well, but very important for both climate mitigation and adaptation. We've got new energy systems, localized food. So, in the event that food shortages or food chains are broken, relying on more local food can help us adapt to that. Improving education, so making our students more aware of the risks of climate change, but also understanding how more extreme weather is going to affect them. And then working with the community and, adapting our grounds so that they are better to coping in terms of extreme weather and flood risk. So basically, mitigation adaptation increases our resilience to cope with the extreme shocks that might come from the consequences of climate change. So why is it important? Well, we're obviously living in a really fast-paced landscape that's changing all the time. Our environment's changing, our politics are becoming quite extreme in nature and are very changeable, and then we are facing massive advances in technology. So we do need to look ahead and think about how we're going to cope with these changes. We're also facing multiple crises in school, so mental health, school refusal, the SEND crisis, which I'm sure you're all aware of, and there's increasing amounts of misinformation that is coming to our students, but also to staff. So we need to all be really clear on what exactly is happening and how it's going to affect us and our young people. We are increasingly facing budgetary restrictions, and that's going to, everything that we do in terms of climate planning. Obviously, there are some things that are going to cost money. Maybe we can't afford things right now, those extreme changes, but a lot of what we're talking about is about behavior change. So, when we're thinking about adaptation and resilience, are there things that we can do within budget right now? What can we do later on, and advocate for funds to make your schools more resilient? And then there's higher expectations. So more and more things are falling on schools to look after. So I just wanted to put that in there. Okay, so here's some examples of sort of mitigation and adaptation in school specifically. So just in terms of mitigation, we want to think about climate change. We want to make sure it's embedded into our curriculum. It is difficult with the current national curriculum, but that is seeing a review. But there is flexibility within curriculum to make climate change more accessible for our students to discuss and to understand. And then in terms of staff training, are you putting aside time so that staff are understanding what the climate crisis is, what it means for them and their students, and what the nature crisis also means? And then there's also opportunities to develop our site and think about how we can make it greener. Um, but then on the other side, adaptations is things like, you know, facing different weather events. So how can we make our systems more resilient? So I just wanted to highlight that when we're thinking about both of those, the most important thing is that we have a crisis sensitive educational planning approach. So it does mean we have to change the way we've planned, we have planned before. So we need to be thinking about sustainability with sustainability in mind. Okay, so the top tips, or my top tips for adaptation and resilience is, first of all, to form a sustainability committee. Now, if you're in a small primary school, then obviously you don't have a huge team, but in larger secondary schools, you really need to think about those key players that you need to get around the table. People like the site managers, operational managers, the curriculum leads, the careers lead, and someone from SLT and the governing body. You want all of those decision makers to be coming together and talking about how climate change and nature crisis are going to be affecting you. Road mapping. So sometimes schools get so when they do engage with sustainability, lots of people have lots of ideas and it can become quite overwhelming because you don't really know where to put everything. But creating a roadmap and saying, look, some things we are going to have to park, some things are going to require money, but some things do just mean let's change the way we behave, or let's advocate for more change from our parental body or something like that. So road mapping just allows you to think, right, is this something we can do now? Is it something we can do maybe next year? Is it something that we need to wait for? CPD for teachers, just thinking about whether you've got a baseline of knowledge amongst your school staff. Climate literacy is a really good example. Does everybody understand what net zero means, for example? Does everybody understand what adaptation is? Maybe there's an opportunity to sit around and increase the carbon literacy amongst your staff. And student voice, it's really powerful. You need to know how your students are feeling about this, but also they are a strong advocates for change. So really listen to them within your climate action planning. And then community engagement. You've got lots of people around the school and engaged in school, particularly parents and governors. Can they support you in what you want to achieve?